So, you want to get good at Apprentice battling? Well, I'll show you how to survive in PvP in every sequence. First things first, let's go over the pros and cons of the battle. Pros: at high sequence, time to kill is the fastest out of all battles. Amazing divination and anti-divination stats, both being in top 3 of all battles. Strong at high sequence, it's one of the strongest at high sequence in the game. Easy. And of course, teleport. I mean, who doesn't like teleport? Cons, let's move on to cons. Average spirituality reserves, nothing interesting there. Normal, not increased, not decreased. Very fragile. This pathway gains 0 extra armor and 0 extra toughness compared to all the other pathways, which gain at least a little bit on it. It's also very bad in prolonged fights, and very weak at low to mid sequences, having no attack abilities and only survivability. Of course, these survivabilities do not help you in PvP almost at all. It doesn't help. Its abilities at high sequence also drain spirituality insanely fast. At sequence 1, you can use 2 abilities and be at sequence and spirituality 0. Starting off, sequence 9. It has nothing much to show for. Only 1 ability. Increase spirituality a little. Anyway, you open a door, then you shift through it, and you can bypass blocks. It's up to 3 for sequence 9, and it increases with every sequence. So, moving on to sequence 8. Sequence 8 is where it gets a little more interesting. Going to abilities, we can see a lot of tricks. The ones you should focus on are electric shock, trick freezing, and trick escape. First, let's go over trick shock. Trick shock, when enabled, uses your spirituality to stun enemies in place. This can be very good for PvP, and it's pretty self-explanatory. Next, trick freezing. With this, you can freeze enemies in a wide range. By clicking, it uses spirituality as well. 70 spirituality. And it's freeze. Or there's an alternative. You can also press on the enemy and it will freeze them as well. Next, okay. Trick escape. This, well, it's also pretty self-explanatory. You just get hit and you don't get hit. It negates all damage as far as I know. Even mental, aging. No, it doesn't negate aging or corruption. It only negates mental and physical. Moving on to sequence 7. Sequence 7 doesn't have any new abilities. It boosts spirituality by a sizable amount, also boosting the previous abilities of sequence 8. For example, trick freezing. As you can see, it's a way bigger range, and it boosts divination and anti-divination stats. If you're curious about divination, go to the wiki. I'll link it to the bottom. Anyway, moving on to sequence 6. Scribe. This is pretty useless right now, but this will be one of the best abilities you will have at a high sequence. At sequence 1, to be exact. This lets you scribe abilities which other people use. I'm not gonna demonstrate here because I don't have another person to play with me, because I'm friendless, and yeah. Anyway, scribe the ability. After you get an ability, you can right click and use it here. At mid sequences, you can only use it once. At higher sequences, you copy it and you won't need to copy it again. You can use it infinitely, which is pretty overpowered, I would say, but it's pretty good. However, sequence 0 abilities have a 50% duration debuff and damage debuff, which is pretty annoying, but it's still pretty good, I would say. Moving on, Sequence 5. Well, sequence 5, this is where Apprentice starts to show its perks. Blink. It lets you blink in any direction you want. If you shift, you can change the distance. Right now it's up to 25, but later on at high sequence it can be up to 2 kilometers, which is quite a lot. So be careful, otherwise you might teleport and crash server. Be careful with it. Moving on, blink after image. This is very good. It trains your spirituality, but it gives you a passive dodge effect. If anything hits you, it instantly TPs you out of it. It says here, but ignore that. Blink after image, it TPs out of damage, which is pretty good. Depending on the damage, the amount of damage you would have received, and 50, it multiplies it and applies it to your spirituality. As you can see. If it would be like, for example, we summon a warden and it attacks us, it will take a lot more spirituality because it does a lot more damage. For example, it took 150 because it did more damage. Of course, this thing does not negate all damage because that is unnatural and that's not easy, according to the devils. Whatever. Moving on, invisible hand. It's okay. Moving on, invisible hand. This lets you pick up any block and throw it at the enemy. It does 25 hearts, which is a lot actually, and you can use it to bully your opponents. But at sequence 5, they will have stronger abilities, I would say. Well, I wouldn't say. I know they do. But a sailor, for example, will still one-shot you and so on. So I suggest still running away and using blink after image to run away and avoid damage. Anyway, the best part of sequence 5, Traveler's Door. This lets you teleport to any course you want. For example, 100, 100, 100. It lets you make a door, shift through it, and teleport to any course you can imagine. Or if you add an instant at the end of it, you can instantly teleport, exactly like a teleport command, which I would say is pretty overpowered, but it's amazing. That's why I made this pathway. Anyway, you can also, at higher sequences, do different dimensions. Of course, right now you can't, because you are not high enough sequence. For example, Nether instant. I usually would do, but I can't, because I'm not seeing a high enough sequence. Anyway, how I can suggest use this in PvP is use invisible hand, throw blocks, it does 25, or use blink and use maybe a mace. Use mace and blink, and you can use this in the offhand, do this, and easily do a lot of damage. Of course, someone attack is kinda low, and I'm about to. But I would suggest using the blocks. It does about the same amount of damage, as you can see. But with the blocks, you can easily do a lot more damage, doing a total of 25. Yeah, anyway, moving on. Sequence 4. Sequence 4 is your first state of high sequence. First, let's move. Try blink state. Blink state lets you fly. Lets you fly. That's it pretty much at the cost of spirituality. It also lowers your ability cooldowns at the cost of worms. Not using this for ability cooldown. If you drain all your worms, you will instantly die. The cooldown depends on the amount you have traveled. For example, let's say I fly around and use freezing, for example. It will use my worm. And see, I am dying. If I use it again, I will probably insta die. So be careful with that. Storm Mirage is... I wouldn't use it for PvP, I'll be honest. It lets you teleport instead of yourself. Let's teleport the attacker away from you, which I wouldn't use, I'll be honest, because I don't like to use it in PvP. Example, this is a pretty good ability to run away from your enemy or annoy them myself. if you press it on an entity, it will launch them into a door. At least it should. What? When you press it on an entity or a player, it will pull them in and exile them to a different dimension, where they will stay for 20 seconds and hopefully take a lot of damage, because there's natural disasters in that dimension as much as there can be. Moving on, there's one last ability which is not that useful for PvP right now. At high sequences, it's very good. It lets you extract worms and use them. For example, use one, you right click them, and it lets you use clones. You can create your own army. Of course, be careful, because if you take out enough, it will kill you. At high sequences, you won't have to worry about that. Moving on to sequence 3 of the Apprentice pattern. Sequence 3 is where it gets very good. Spatial Authority Gauge and Special Authority Tier. These two are very, very good. Special Authority Tier there lets you suck in everything with destruction on and destroy. It creates a tier in space itself, doing a massive amount of damage, which almost one-shots anything, and door players below your sequence, which is a thing to remember. Authority Cage lets you cage anyone within your crosshair. You can let them escape it with right click, at least it should, yeah, with right click, and it opens them up. For PvP, how to PvP with them? Let's say you have a player here. Let's say this player, this player, you don't like him, right? You don't like him. So use a tier and he dies. That's pretty much it. Or if he's a sequence 3 or something, and he's flying around and he's annoying as shit to get, to steer, it will suck him in. But this cage will be useful later on. This is still very good if you want to annoy a sequence. Moving on to sequence 2. Sequence 2, it's in the middle of the road, what I can say. Dimensional side. This is where you can find your enemies pretty fast. This lets you write a player's name in it, and it shows you where they are. It lets you use abilities on their position and seal them in a bubble. But that bubble is not that good, so I don't suggest. And when you type their nick in, see, this is me. You can go into it and teleport to them. Of course, I'm bugged now because I teleported to myself, and teleporting to myself infinitely, which is kind of stupid. Anyway, use it on another player and you can TP to them. It's pretty easy. I would demonstrate, but I have no friends, so. Replicate. Replicate lets you replicate players and entities, which I haven't used a lot, I'll be honest. Though, if I heard if you use it on a sequence 0, you can replicate them and their abilities. So you can replicate them and go to a safe spot, release them, and use scribing. This is where scribing gets into play. Use scribing to scribe their abilities and find other combos that complement your own abilities. This is one of the main formulas for this pathway. Find scribing other pathways and using their own abilities against them or other pathways. So you can have a counter against everything and have a counter against their abilities, which will protect you. It's a bit complicated, I'll be honest. But if you can master it and find a lot of combinations, moving on. Sealing. Sealing lets you seal the enemy sequence abilities. For example, let's say this player, sequence 4, you right click him with number 4, it seals all his sequence 4 abilities. You can combo this with stun. Let's say you do this. You have a player here, you use some kind of stun. For example, a tier. Where is it? This also complements doubles as a stun, a damage and stun. So you use this, they get stunned there. If they don't die, you can seal their abilities so they cannot do anything, and use any other attack abilities you have, and just make them regret they even joined the server. Anyway, moving on. There's this one, which right now kinda useless. This makes a clone of yourself, which you can use abilities through, but it's not that good because it uses your own spirituality and it drains like fuck. So just throw this out. This for PvP is for later on. You can use it for remote. For, let's say you're like 10,000 blocks away. You want to be safe, you can just spawn infinite clones on the player, which is pretty unfair, I would say, but it's their problem, not yours. And symbolization. This is a very good ability. This pretty much symbolizes you and lets you negate most damage types, except like mental, aging, corruption, and not negate sequence 1 doors abilities. Abilities like Tear and another sequence 1 ability will shred you through symbolization. So this is not a life hack that will make you immune to all damage. So do not get carefree. Moving on. Sequence 1. This is where Apprentice is one of the best in the game. These abilities are amazing. Gravity manipulation, it needs a rework, so it's kinda ass right now, so I'm not even gonna cover it. Anyway, fragmentation. Fragmentation is pretty good. It freezes a time in space. If you walk into it, you can spawn clones. You can spawn 8 clones, depending on your sequence. There's only 4 right now. Wait, no. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, there's 7 clones. They use all kinds of abilities, which as you can see, Scribe is trying to copy, which is pretty useless because again, those are abilities we already have. These all kinds, you just use flashbang, which is a bit annoying. But what can you do? Anyway, also fragmentation. It has a bit of a unknown thing. It freezes all paths. For example, a spectator using Dream into reality, which boosts their health, spirituality, and regeneration and armor stats. Right? If you use fragmentation now and wait 4 seconds, and then they get released, there's a bit of a second where they have 0 protection and 0 boost stats. So if you can hit them a lot within that 1 second, you can kill them almost instantly, which is pretty good, and keep that in mind. Same works for Cage. Starfall is one of the best abilities of the Apprentice. It lets you do a shit of ton of damage, and you should almost always have it in a combo. If you don't have it, you're just losing out. Okay, so how do you win in a PvP with this? Well, if you're sequence 1, you should have already a few abilities described. For example, there's an ability called Awe from Spectator Sequence 7. This lets you freeze and stun people in your area, which combined with door abilities is very OP. For example, let's say you stun them. Actually, I'm gonna use a alternative. Let's say use Tear or freezing. Let's say use Tear or freezing. You use freezing, Tear, then you use where was it? Okay, I don't have it. I'm not gonna give a very good example, but pretty much use Starfall and use other abilities. Tear plus Starfall will probably kill most players, unless it's a spectator sequence 1 with Dream into reality, or a warrior. No, actually, I think it wouldn't kill a Wheel of Fortune and a warrior most likely. The rest, it will probably one shot within 1 second. Sailor and other Apprentice especially. Except sequence 0. You cannot kill a sequence 0 with that. Good luck killing a sequence 0 or sequence 1. It's gonna be very difficult. Anyway, moving on to... Wait, no, there's one more thing. Position. position authority. You type in chat position, you type anything, for example, a creeper. It lets you find anything within range and TP to them. For example, let's say a slime. You can do to them, to me. Anyway, moving on to sequence 0. Sequence 0 is very, very powerful. Going into this ability, conceptualization. This ability is the best damage negator in the game. When you have this activated, nothing except 2 abilities can hit you. That being corruption. No, sorry, it's 3. That being aging, corruption, and sailor lightning authority. Lightning authority can damage you directly. Corruption can corrupt you, but you will not die for a certain amount of time while you have this activated, which is a bit stupid, but the devs are the devs. I cannot change that. But you have to deal with it, so do not get hit even though you have this on. This only a backup. Aging, it ages you, but more slowly. That's why you should still scribe other abilities to negate aging and corruption. Gamma ray burst. This bad boy grabs gamma ray bursts from space and shoots them in a space. It does a shit ton of damage. But like with Starfall, it has to have the opponent not moving, which I'll get to the formula of attack in a bit. Next on, we'll go to Seal Strength. Seal Strength, I suggest just going to 10, always 10. It strengthens duration and strength of Cage and Protective Seal, giving it more duration. Now, I'll give you the most basic formulas to win fights. So to start with, the most basic and easiest, conceptualization or symbolization into stun, into attack. Now this is the basic formula to kill players, but it's easy to break if the opponent is competent. C is short for conceptualization. Conceptualization into stun, into seal, into attack. Now, what I mean by seal, I mean the sealing sequence 2 ability, where you seal their abilities, which doesn't let them either run away or negate stuns. There's also one with situational cage seals. For example, conceptualization, you seal them with the cage, spatial authority cage, then you attack with Starfall while it charges up, and then when the first star comes down, you unseal the cage, which almost instantly starts killing them, and you can kill them very, very, very fast. You can also throw in double stuns and seals of different variants. For example, conceptualization, spectator stun, so awe, apprentice stun like tear, and then you seal them with sequence 2 ability, attack, ability cooldown reset with another spectator ability, seal again if they unseal themselves, attack, and then continue shooting attacks. As you can see, this is a longer combo, but it will let you counter their counter and make them complain to the death. So don't attack on the fly. I recommend pre-planning combos due to the amount of spirituality abilities drain. And if you miss your attack, you're a sitting duck. There's also different ways to attack. No need to even get close, for example. Going in chat, typing position, then typing a user's name, then typing tier, it will spawn a tier on you. It's a bit laggy for me, but pretty much if you wait a second, I spawn, and it will instantly kill any player spotted. Most likely instantly, unless it's like a sequence of 0 warrior or something. You can also cage them like this. Of course, it won't work on me, as I'm caging myself, but you get the general idea. Let's quickly go back sequences as sequence 0. Going back to, where was it? Here, separate worm of stars. Upon use, pressing this, you now have 80,000 worms as sequence 0. So, if you, for example, use abilities, let's say freezing. Okay, I have to probably leave out try. Let's say freezing. As you can see, it uses worms. Remember to have this active, but also be careful. If you go below, if you use more than 10,000 or 12,000, I don't really remember, then you start taking damage. Be careful, it will reduce cooldowns by a lot. Also, blink state, this is pretty useful at high sequence as well. As flying around, the more distance you travel, I already said this, but the more distance you travel, the more worms you use upon ability. And if you travel enough, you can instantly skip any cooldowns, which I think is a bug, but right now it is possible. So make sure to use it. That's it for the formulas and combos. There's a lot of other combos I can show you, but I suggest finding them yourself and experimenting them yourself. Remember, Apprentice abilities are flexible, so have fun and goodbye.